All right, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up. I was just like, I'm starting now. My name is Kim Dorman. I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library, and I'm delighted to see you all here this evening. The Princeton Public Schools reached out to us just at the end of December to see if we would be able to host sort of presentation Q&A session opportunity with their board, and we were delighted to do so because we know that people are really interested and want to learn more about what's happening and these questions that are being raised. So this evening we have three members of the Long-Term Planning Committee of the Board of Education, Beth Barrand, Susan Cantor, and Mara Franceschi, who are going to sort of be here to answer your questions and give you a little bit more information about the referendum. I believe Beth is going to be doing most of the presentation, but I gather that you can ask questions at any point that you have them. The only thing I'm going to remind everybody is that this room is T-Coil enabled. If you'd like to try one of our headsets, we have them over there. If you have a T-Coil enabled device, you can turn that on now. But the most important thing is that it's easier for everyone to hear, whether you have a T-Coil enabled device or not, if everyone uses the microphone. So I ask anyone who's speaking, whether that's one of the presenters or when you have a question, please wait for us to bring you the microphone just so that it's easier for everyone to hear. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend and Board of Education Chair of the Long-Term Planning Committee, or one of the chairs, Beth Barrand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you to the Public Library for allowing us to come here and provide information today. Kim and I go way back. We had children at Riverside together for many years. And I just want to start by saying, thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest in the public schools. We appreciate that you're here to hear from us, and we want to hear from you and have some dialogue and questions if you have them. I want to say that up front, as a Board of Education, we make plans and we create plans and solutions and we present them to the community, but we don't advocate. We're not allowed to advocate, to tell you how we think you should vote. All we can do is provide you with information, let you know we think it's important to vote. So I just want to say here tonight that we're not advocating for one way or the other of how to vote. And if you're interested in hearing from our professionals, we've had a number of different forums already on this topic, and we've recorded them, and they're available on our website, so you can hear from our architects and our demographers and our business administrator and our superintendent, and they give a very nice longer form presentation. So tonight we're really going to just run through the basic idea of what we are asking on the 28th, and my colleagues will kick in when I forget to say something, and we'd love to hear your questions and clear up anything that you'd like to know. So with that, I'll just say we're here to explain what's before the voters on January 28th. There's a special vote, a special election on the 28th. It's a one-day voting period, although you can vote early if you register and ask for a remote early ballot. And what we are doing is it's the culmination of about 7 years of planning. Our community is growing. We know that there's about 1,000 new units of housing that's coming online, residential housing. Much of it's been built around the shopping center, but there's more to come on Franklin Street. There's 160 units that will be built across from the old hospital site. There's also 64 units that are being built at the old Save site up on 206 on the edge of town. So we're aware of these developments that have come, and we have done planning based on the number of units. Well, the seminary is coming as well, but we actually don't have those numbers in our plans. I'll talk about that a little bit. We're allowed by the state to do demographic planning for things that have been approved. The seminary site was not approved at the time when we did our submissions to the state. So we actually are planning for the third round projects, which are being built around us. There's additional housing that's happening. Trends keep going up, and we hope that what we are proposing will hold us for at least 5 to 7 years, and if we're somehow underestimating the growth, then it will hold us for 10 to 15 years, and that would be great, right? We won't need to come back for anything. So we have an understanding of what the growth is, and we went and we consulted with our professionals, and what we did was we had a series of meetings with the public, with parents, with our teachers, with our staff, and we said, here are our values, and the values that we looked at were, and based on input from the community, how do we create enough space at the elementary and middle school level in the district to maintain class sizes, to create space for growth, to better serve the students that we have, to continue the programming that we offer right now for the students, which is valued by the community, to improve student comfort. There's an HVAC element of what we're going to be asking for, and to ensure more students can walk to school and not be bused across town. Right now, we have a lot of kids that live in the community park area, which is a dual language immersion school only. And if you move there after your child is in kindergarten, you have to go to a different school. So we are busing children all around town. And we will need at some point to redistrict because the growth that's happening is coming mainly in the central areas near the shopping center. And we have 4 local elementary schools that are much loved. And that came out in the planning. No one wants to leave that system. Everybody likes having these little local schools, but there's growth happening unequally. So at some point, we need to step back and say, how do we reallocate all of the children that are coming and that are here among the 4 schools so that everyone has an equitable experience, a kind of a similar class size, similar opportunity and programming. And the projects that we're proposing on January 28th will allow us to do that in the most effective, practical, cost-effective way based on what our professionals have told us. So if we don't pass the referenda projects, every time one of these new projects comes online and the children come, we need to make adjustments, and families and children will be disrupted. So we're trying to do minimal disruption. So when we planned, we had a matrix, which you can find on our website under future planning. We had a matrix of all of these values, and then we looked at different models. We considered a sister school model, which would mean that we would actually pair up our elementary schools and make one a K3, I think, or K2, and one a 3 to 5. People didn't like that. They wanted to stick with their local K-5 elementary schools. We looked at a 5-6 model where you would build a new building somewhere. That was very expensive. It's new construction, and the state doesn't give us as much support for that type of thing. And then we looked at building where growth, and that's really what this plan is, where we're trying to add to the schools in the areas where there's growth and most effectively reallocate the kids. So this is the general background of the projects. Now I'm going to show you a couple slides, and I apologize, there's 2 at once. Focus now on the 3 questions. So the big picture is we're presenting the solutions in the form of 3 questions, and it's a total of $89 million of investment in the schools. We will get $20 million approximately in state aid to take away from that chunk. So they will support the debt service on this investment, so it's state money that comes back. We pay it in our taxes to the state. They have a kitty of money that they give to school districts when they do this type of expansion. We could bring some of it back to Princeton through this plan. We've split it into 3 questions because we are very much aware of the cost, and some people may not want to support us for $89 million, and so we've tried to break it up. Maybe some people want to just support question 1, or just question 1 and 2, or all 3. And the questions are contingent. So if question one needs to pass for question 2 to pass, and questions 1 and 2 need to pass for questions 3 to pass. And the questions are divided into basically the elementary expansion, making space at the elementary level. That's question 1, by expanding Community Park Elementary School. Question 1 also contains an HVAC upgrade for the high school. We have done several referenda in the last couple of years. We've been working on the buildings in the district. It's been about 20 years since a lot of work was done. It's kind of like your house. You have to do it every 20, 25 years. You've got to replace the roofs and the HVAC and all the other systems. We've now done that with all the schools in the last couple of years. In fact, the elementaries now all have HVAC, and we were able to put it in before COVID, which was really helpful because we have these higher level MERV filters, which allowed us to have cleaner air quality. When we had those smoke events, we were able to make sure the children could be in school. So the elementaries have been done, the middle school's been done, the high school is the last piece. We need HVAC upgrades at the high school because it's 22 years old. That's actually the slide on the other side. So I'm talking to that. We've got steam boilers in the high school, and it's just time. The system is outdated. We will estimate that we'll save approximately $200,000 a year by upgrading the system. because we'll have much better energy use and we won't have to maintain something that's been falling apart. And the nice thing about the state subsidies, they support up to 34% of the cost. So a lot of the state monies we're getting back is because we're renovating older things, we're upgrading our HVACs, we're trying to use the buildings we have. If you build new space, they don't give you very much money. They say, you know, they don't want brand new schools, they want you to take the space you have and make it better. So the first question, again, is this elementary school expansion, and we'll go into detail on that in another slide, plus the HVAC. It costs $37.9 million, that's the first question. The tax impact of this question alone is $222 a year, but the estimated debt service aid we will get is $11.4 million from the state. And I just want to step back for a second. 25 years ago, this community approved a very large referendum, about $81 million, and they built the PAC at the Performing Arts Center at the high school, the pool at the middle school, a new gym at the high school. We added classrooms on all of the schools. And it effectively would be $140 million today. So this was a massive kind of upgrade to the schools about 25 years ago. That debt was sitting on the, we have a levy that we charge in the taxes for the facilities. It's like the investment. That debt was sitting on that levy for 25 years, 20 years. In 2022, that debt went way down. We were done. We paid it off. So taxes for the facilities levy went way down. So in many districts, they'll say we're going to do tax neutral investments in our school. So West Windsor did like a $100 million referendum, and they said it's tax neutral. That means that when their old debt came off, they put new debt straight on. We didn't do that. We let the debt come down, and taxes actually went down, and we were able to keep school taxes flat in the last couple of years, despite inflation, because we had room because that debt had gone down. We want to take it back up to about where it was, a little bit higher if we do all three questions. So it's a similar investment that the community has been making for the last 20 years. So question one, I've explained. Question two would be the middle school. And the middle school, again, is very tight. We have almost 800 kids in the school. There's a lot of, I'll explain when we'll talk a little bit about what the needs are there, but we plan to add some spaces at the middle school in ways that are critical for learning today for the kids. And then also some small renovations at Princeton High School. And this is really taking a space in the basement that we're using for the tech crew, and it's very underutilized. And we're going to renovate it so we can get 3 classrooms and 2 small learning spaces out of it. And we're going to move the tech group, and the tech group support all of the laptops and devices that we have. Since COVID, we're 1-to-1, which means every child has a device, and the state requires that every child do testing on devices. We don't really have a choice. None of us are really fans of the devices, but we have a lot of devices and we have a lot of tech needs. So we have a small tech department. We would move them from this basement space, that's a big mess, and we'll put them in the middle school in some older classrooms. And I say older classrooms because in 5 years, who knows, maybe we put the tech somewhere else and use those classrooms if we need them, but we don't right now. We'd put them in older classrooms, and then we're going to build some new space where the children will be. So that's question 2. Question 3 is an additional bit of elementary expansion that we believe we are going to need when all of the housing is built out. We don't need it tomorrow. We're probably going to need it in a year or 2, and it will cost more. It's much more cost-effective for us to do it all at once while we're working on everything else. So question 3 is adding a little bit more classroom space at the elementary level at Littlebrook School and making some improvements in that building. Our elementary schools date back from the 60s, and so this is an opportunity for us to add space and to fix some things that have become outdated and no longer work well for children. Again, all of this is about the kids, and we're focusing on, what's the biggest impact for kids. We've had people ask us, well, what about the trailers at the high school? Don't you have some teachers and trailers? Yes, we do. They're teachers and trailers, and they don't cost that much, and they're already there. So we're not touching that. We don't want to add more to the tax burden. We want to just do what's absolutely necessary for kids, not too much, not too little. Another thing, we have the Valley Road site. Part of that is an old building that should come down at some point. It's no longer usable. We got a quote on that. It was about $4 million. We didn't put that on this referendum. We don't want to ask taxpayers to take apart something that doesn't serve children right now. We don't think that that's an effective use of dollars. So we also on this slide talk about an annual budget versus bond referendum. people say to us, well, why don't you just fix this out of the operating budget? These changes that we're asking for, these investments are much larger than we could do through the operating budget. We have a 2% cap year to year on the operating budget, and 71% of our budget is for staff and benefits, and that's at 3%. We've negotiated a very nice contract there. We're one of the lowest in the state. But our budget is already almost nearly unsustainable. We're trying to figure out how to make it work every year. There's no room really for large capital projects. And if you do a capital project out of your operating budget, the state doesn't give you any aid. So the way to do it most effectively is have a referendum, let the taxpayers decide, and then the state will give you debt aid for that investment. So what are we doing at the different schools? Community Park Elementary School is in the center of town. It's where we're adding the elementary space. It is not, there's a dual language immersion program going in that school right now. So all the students are learning in Spanish and English. It's a very well regarded program. People who are in it really, really appreciate it. But we're not doing the renovation based on programming. We need space. It doesn't matter what you'd have in that building. Right now, there's no room for the children who live in that neighborhood all to go to school in that building. They're being bused all around town because either they're not taking the Spanish program, they came in too late, they don't speak Spanish. Even if we took that building and made it a traditional English track, there's no room for them. So this is the place where we want to add the space. And what we would do is add, it's a 2-level school, which is really helpful because we can add a little bit of an addition in the back. Do I have a, I don't have a, I do. I have a, can you see my arrow? You can. I have an arrow here. So this is the overall building. So in the back, we would be adding some classrooms and a new gymnasium space. And when you look specifically at the floor plans, you see we have an old library here that's kind of small, and we would make 2 classrooms out of that library. We have a cafeteria that we are not really changing the shape of, but we're going to take a stage out of it and make more seating for children. So we get more use out of that, and we'll upgrade the kitchen so that we can get more kids through there. Basically, we take these core spaces and make them large enough for more children. Then we would take the old gym and we would turn it into a newer library space, and we put a big soundproof wall in the middle, and then we make a larger music room, and then we have a choir room, because many more of our children are taking fine arts, are taking music, are taking choir. We're very happy about that, but the spaces that we have are too small for them. They don't all fit. We would also then add a larger new gymnasium on the back that would have a stage. So that would be an additional place. And then we would connect this building, which makes the building much more efficient for students, with a walkway all the way across. Although out here you can't have an indoor walkway for safety reasons, but it would be covered. So we fix the flow of the building. Instead of having dead ends on 2 of the wings, you actually bring it into a contiguous space, which is good for safety and for flow. The new classrooms would be on a little bit of a wing here, and 2 stories of them. So you'd have classrooms and then small learning spaces. 5 new classrooms, 2 new small group instruction rooms. Why do we need small group instruction? Do one of you guys want to speak to that? I'm doing all the talking here. Go ahead.
You're doing well. We were just saying, we were discussing earlier that 20 years ago you could have a few large classrooms, and the needs in today's modern learning environment is that you need a lot more small pullouts for special education, for meetings with parents, for gifted and talented. Yeah, and so there's different needs today that we necessitate a lot more of those smaller rooms.
So we would add smaller rooms, we'd expand the library, we'd add a new multi-purpose room gym so they have a appropriate gym space wrapped around the corridor, and then basically just make that school bigger so we can welcome more kids. The kids are coming, we just need room for them. Littlebrook Elementary would be the additional piece of elementary space. And again, at Littlebrook, we'll be adding how many, 6 new classrooms, 2 small group instructional spaces by simply taking large kindergarten rooms and adding and dividing off some little spaces there so we have an extra learning space there. We'd take a corridor of these support services rooms that are currently there. They're like a railroad apartment. You have to go from one to the next without a door, and they are where children get special services like special education and speech therapy and, all these things where they're one-on-one and there's no privacy, and we would fix that in the building. We would make the cafeteria work a bit better. It's not a lot bigger. We would just get rid of some of storage space that's not optimal right now, so there's more room for children to eat. And then we would add a music room on the back. Again, the fine arts, we don't have enough space for all the kids that want to study. So that's the elementary solution that we're proposing to get the space we need for the kids that are coming. Now, this is the middle school and the high school. I'll start with the middle school, and this is middle schools in question 2. So the middle school, this schematic here this is Walnut Street down here at the bottom. Can you see I'm at the bottom of the screen? Walnut Street, in the past, we've added kind of pods onto the building as enrollment has grown. We would add a brand new pod here of classrooms, and they would be 2 new classrooms, 3 flexible classrooms that can adjust in size. We can put dividers on them, use them big, use them small, get 2 rooms. 2 new science labs, which were much needed. And then here in the back, let me get my pointer going. We would expand the cafeteria, which is currently undersized for the number of children we have, including the kitchen. And we would add on in the back, an all-purpose room, which would allow us to have space for the children to do assemblies, to have indoor recess. There's currently no space for that in the building. And it could be sealed off and used by the public. It's on weekends, it's a community space. But this is all flexible spaced, and you can take the chairs out and use it all as one big assembly space. And our principal, I think, is very excited about that possibility, because right now, you've got all these 6th through 8th graders, and if they can't go outside, there's not really a lot of space for them to be moving around at lunchtime and getting their energy out, and they're in the hallways, they're sitting on the floors, it's very tight. These blue spaces are performing arts, choral and band rooms, which previously were smaller rooms and are really too small, and we're just adjusting the size. We're not expanding anything, we're just moving things around a little bit, adjusting some walls. We would also do the front office. We would adjust the entry. Right now, it's difficult for a wheelchair. We have a ramp, it's at the wrong level. We'd have a man trap, which we need to have in all our schools now, the safety requirements, and we'd have a conference area and some smaller group offices, which we don't have, so there's no room for conferences with parents, for privacy, for group meetings. So just a little bit of an upgrade to the front office in order to make it more functional. Importantly, we would also make a corridor around, this would connect this whole building again. So you'd have a corridor, where is it? Here, across. Right now, the middle school has these wings and they dead end. And so children go in and out, and we have stairways that go up and stairways that go down, and everything is really tight. And we would connect all of that across so the building has flow. So again, we're taking the old building and we're just making it work better and adding some space that we need. I think I covered all the basic components of that piece. Then we also would take the tech group and bring them over there and put them in older classrooms, which again could be reused in the future. And then if we go to the high school slide, you can see where the tech people are right now. They're in a basement space that has windows, which is why it could be very nice classrooms, right? So we're taking these tech people, putting them in the middle school, carving out 2 new classrooms, taking this gallery space that we have down there. It's like kind of a locker basement type Soho space. It's all concrete. And we would kind of re-envision that gallery space and make it into 2 flexible rooms, which could be used for lots of purposes. But you can also hang art on the walls so people can see the art that the kids are doing. But we're basically just taking a basement space and reusing it much more effectively. And then we're obviously doing the HVAC at the high school as well. So what's this next? So again, to talk about, getting our space to better serve the students we have. The top picture is a picture of our middle school cafeteria. Right now it's undersized and it's not really appropriate for this population that we have. And an example of something that we've done successfully is in the high school over the last summer. From one of the previous referenda, we took the existing cafeteria, which was not really serving the population. I think we have about 1,500 kids in the building, and it served a few over 300. So most of the kids couldn't get in there for the hot lunch. We have one other remote place where they can get some food, but it was very undersized, and it was not functioning well. And the acoustics were terrible, so no one could use it really for meetings effectively. We redid the acoustics and the lighting, and we just fixed the flow of the kitchen area to make it more like a ski lodge so you can get more children in and out faster. And everyone seems to be very pleased with that renovation. Again, the state paid for a third of it because it's a renovation of an existing space. And we were very pleased that our professionals were able to get that done over the summer. And it was ready this fall, and it's been people are quite happy with it. So I'll also say, just kind of stepping back, when I first got on the board, I ran for the board in 2017, and 2018 was my first year. And that was when, you'll remember probably, there was a big upset in the community because the schools were proposing a very large referendum. And at that time, I had questions as well. And when I got on the board, I thought to myself, well, how do we together solve all those problems or those challenges? Because we still have the space. How are we going to solve this space challenge in a way that is really well thought through? And I'll just say that we've spent the last 7 years really working on this problem. And I personally feel that we've solved a lot of the issues that raised questions for me last time, which was, how are you going to get all this done? Who has experience doing this? You're not taking care of the existing buildings. Why should we give you additional space? Have you thought about the impact on the operating budget? All these questions that we had last time, we've tried to answer, and I think we have good answers to. And because we've been doing work on the buildings now, very slowly as we need it, upgrading them, fixing the roofs, fixing the walls, fixing the masonry, fixing the lighting, fixing old HVAC using energy grants from the state. We have a team in place in the school. We have a business administrator who's very good and knows the numbers back and forward. We have a internal group of people who are used to now getting things done and working with construction. We have a construction management company that we've worked with, because as a public district, we have to take the low bidders. So whoever comes to us, we have to accept the low bid. And that means that they're going to come back with change orders, because they're going to try to get their money from you through, arguing with you in court over change orders. So we need to have construction managers on site watching everything that they do. And last summer we had 2 people in district watching projects all over the district. And most of the projects we're doing now, many of them are under budget. So we feel like as a board, I think we're very pleased with our professionals. They've been executing very well on the projects that the taxpayers have previously approved. So we have a good team in place. We understand how the budget works, and we've been very transparent. And the operating budget is a tricky thing to balance, and we know that. And we will need teachers for these spaces, and that is something we will have to figure out as a community. How do we fund these things, given the 2% cap? There is an ability to tax more when there's growth, but there's a 4-year look back at when the growth comes. Susan.
I also want to point out, and you could see me after the presentation, that for those of you that are 65 and maybe have more of a fixed income, the state this year has enacted websites that you can go to, and they will freeze your taxes if you qualify. And the qualifications are pretty high in terms of your income level. So if any of you are eligible and want to look into that, I have the website that you can check and see if you're eligible for that, because the state has realized that they want people who have lived in the community a certain amount of time to be able to stay in their community and afford to stay in their community, and they've set up ways that you can kind of freeze your taxes. And so even if the town or the schools are raising the taxes, your taxes will be frozen. So if you're eligible or think you might be eligible, see me and I'll write down the website that you can go and check that out.
And I'll just sum up and say that for this price tag that we're asking for the total, again, we would get $20 million back from the state, but we would also get 12 elementary classrooms, 13 new refreshed classrooms at the middle school, plus labs. We would get four classrooms at the high school. We would get 3 expanded cafeterias and multi-purpose rooms. We would have 5 expanded performing arts spaces, 2 additional gym spaces, and 1 updated and efficient HVAC at the high school. So we are really, we really believe that we've figured out a way to get the most bang for the buck for the taxpayers, because we are all very sensitive and we're all taxpayers as well. But we would welcome your questions. We'd like to know what's not clear. This is very complicated stuff. We've been working on it for a long time, so apologize that I'm rushing through everything so quickly.
Thank you so much. Actually, it's true. I'm here because I got questions, and I thank you. You explained very well the, let's say, plan. But I think that the question is not if this is good or not. It seems definitely good. Of course, the aim and what you propose seems extremely good. But the question is this $89 million. And first, let's say a technical note. It's not true that we have 20 million from the state. We are the state. We have on a different, let's say, tax. Instead of tax to Princeton, tax to New Jersey. So let's say that we have 80 million. I may be wrong, and I'm asking because I don't know if I'm right or wrong. These 89 million have been computed without a competitive bid. So you said we want to be transparent, we are transparent, but I think my understanding is that there was not a competitive bid. And in case I'm wrong, and there was, it is this that you have to show.
Yeah.
You have to show why, for example, you have 5 plans, one for 10 million, one for 200 millions. At the end, it came out this 89. So if there was a competitive bid, you have to show. If there was not, well, this is kind of difficult to justify because it's anyways public money.
Go ahead.
I'll start out by speaking to it, and my fellow board members can also answer. So the way the price was developed is this is the amount. We have an architect that builds schools in the entire state. He works with his team, and they do a cost estimate for each of the projects based upon their experience with the projects. They build in the contingency. In case there are issues with the project, they build in professional fees. That then goes to the state for them to look at to make sure they believe that that pricing is correct. When we go out for bid, we break down the projects into pieces, and you're correct, we go out for a competitive bid. If the bids come in too high, the board has the right to reject the bids, and we have done that. And we've waited and said, we can't accept this bid because it's higher than what we expected. We want you to rebid it out again, and we want to get at or under our bid. And we've had that with projects over the last 5 years. So we've maybe delayed a project for several months because we didn't get a price that we considered a competitive bid. We've also had, which has been great, projects that have come in hundreds of thousands of dollars under what we anticipated, and that was great because we were able to save money and return that money to taxpayers when it comes out lower. So you're correct, they're doing educated estimates, but our board, every time we do a competitive bid, has the right to reject or accept that bid that comes in. Even if it's the lowest, we can still reject it. We don't have to take it. So if it's coming in much too high, based upon these professional submissions, then we will reject it, because we only will, whether if it's just question 1 that passes, if question 1 passes only, we'll only have $37.9 million to spend. We won't have any more money to spend, so if the bids come in high, that's a problem. But we believe with the professionals we've engaged and the experience we've had the last few years, they've been coming in at or lower on the bids, that they seem to have a good handle. But, you know, we know there could be, we see what's happening in the world. Let's say tariffs go into effect for several months and prices go up a little, we may have to say, nope, we can't take your bid right now. We're going to wait that out and make sure. But we can't spend any more through a referendum process than what's on here. So
Thank you for waiting for the mic. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You clarified to me. So what I understood was right. You didn't have a competitive bid on this sum. You have your expert and so. And the problem generally is the opposite. You, for example, found this figure, 89 million. But maybe having competition in planning, maybe the figure is 10 million.
it
How
will
do
come
you
back
know
to
if
you.
we don't have?
If it's lower, like let's say the professionals have said it's going to be 89.9 million, and it only comes out to being 80 million, that money cannot be used for anything else. It is returned to the taxpayer. And so you will see your taxes, that money goes back to the taxpayer if we don't use the money. We can't use it for anything else. It is illegal for us to use for anything else, and it goes back to the taxpayer to pay off the debt service.
It's not,
Oh,
you want to explain why we don't do competitive? You can't bid projects that haven't been approved by the taxpayers. We need to have a vote first before we're able to go out to bid. And one of the reasons we don't have a breakdown of the projects in more detail, I've heard our business administrator explain this a number of times, because we don't want to put the pricing out before we do the bidding, because it would be detrimental to all of us in terms of the ability to contract. People would see it and say, oh, they're ready to pay that, we're going to come in at the number. We don't say exactly how it's broken down. The state sees it, right? The state sees very much, we have this whole breakdown of what every project has been estimated at. But the way it works in public school building and construction is we are required by law to give them estimates, and then the state looks at those estimates, determines what's A, that they're appropriate for the number of students we have, and B, they say this certain percentage is eligible for our debt aid. And debt aid is something that we all pay in our state taxes, but it doesn't come back to us in any way, shape, or form unless we use it in our schools, right? It's out there, it's a kitty of money that they will give to West Windsor and to New Brunswick or whoever else is doing their projects. If we're not in there, it doesn't come back. It's just money we've already paid. We don't have a choice. So the state debt aid is tax money from our community, but it's gone to the state level. It's gone into a big kitty. It's available to all schools all around the state. And the only way we get any of it back is to do projects through referendum like we're doing. Does that make sense?
I would say, I really don't understand why we should rely only on one source. Because this is what we're telling you.
Mm-hmm.
We have only they define this figure. And maybe it was wrong.
Right.
Can you repeat?
A second opinion, let's say. It's like when you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
You're telling me the school board has only one doctor.
Yeah.
It's nice to have more opinion.
I guess, yeah, and I guess I would say that,
Can you just repeat what he said?
Oh,
that in essence, we're still relying on just one estimate, and that is of the architect who has a lot of experience in that field. And that is correct. I mean, it is the law that constrains us to that model, and if there's anything I have learned in the last 3 years is that a lot of this government stuff does not make any sense. So if we ever look like we're doing something that makes no sense, it's probably because there's some constraint there that makes it not make sense. But the second opinion is that government agency. When we turn it into the Department of Education, those are the second pair of eyes that say, yep, that's realistic, that's not realistic. You know, it doesn't cost $10 million to do a cafeteria, it costs $5 million. They're the ones that are like, have that are a second opinion on that, so.
They had this paper, we submitted this paperwork over 6 months ago, and they spend months going through each line of this and give feedback back to the architect before it came to the board and before it went out to the public. So they absorb that feedback from the state, who looks at every building project in the state. Our architect probably has 10 or 15 building projects. Architects for school buildings have to be certified You can't just like pick any architect in town. You have to pick one that New Jersey has certified, so they have a certain level of expertise in this. But our second opinion is the state, who came back and said, you know, for this, relook at it. We don't think your prices are right, and we came to what they believe is an estimate that will be the highest, or it will come in lower. That's been our goal. We've done 3 or 4 referendums around HVAC, around roofs, and we've come in at or below the estimates consistently.
And just to follow up with that, it's also the law that we have to accept the lowest bid. Oh, sorry, I'm a mother of 2 children who are currently in the schools. My name is Brenda Frazier, and I'm here because I think this is really important, and I want to help the rest of the community understand how important it is. So I just wanted to say that, as Beth said, the school has to accept the lowest bid for something. So it's not as if there's one contractor who we say, okay, here's our project, what's your bid? And they say 89 million, and we say, yay, that's how much we budgeted. It's like, who's going to renovate this little thing, and who's going to build this walkway, and who's going to build this? And for each of those projects, multiple people, multiple agents or, you know, companies put in a bid, and we are required by law to take the lowest bid. So if it turns out that this highly experienced architectural firm actually doesn't know what they're doing, that would come out, right? The total would be lower, and then we would all save money, right? It's not as Susan was saying, they don't just get, oh, we did it for 60 million, so we'll just pocket the extra 29 million. That's not like how it works. It goes back to the taxpayers.
And we have an operations committee. We meet monthly. And many of us have different backgrounds we bring. I'm a corporate lawyer. I'm a finance lawyer. You know, they have experience in business and finance, and the board, they'll come to us and say, we're going to bid something out. We're bidding this piece of it out now, and we see the numbers and we know what they should be. And so they'll put a bid together, and sometimes they'll come back and say, oh, it's way too high, you know, way too high. And then we say, okay, what are we going to do? We break things up. We reorganize them. We say maybe we'll do this later. We've had supply chain issues. You know, we've seen a lot of the kind of rough and tumble of how these markets work. And so sometimes we don't take the bids, and we say, that's way too high, we're not going to do it. And we don't have to do it. We're getting your permission to do all these projects, but if for some reason the markets go crazy and there's no, you know, like there's no windows, that happened right after COVID, or we can't get the steel, that happened also during COVID, then you have to wait or figure out a different way to do it, right? These are plans that we need approval, which give us kind of the room then to work on projects. And by the way, people say to us, well, we want to see more detail. Well, we don't want to pay for more detail yet, because if it doesn't pass, then it goes into our operating budget, and we don't have the funds to be spending, doing all of the studies and everything. Once it is approved, then we can do all the more detailed work to prepare the bids and do all the next things that are supposed to happen in this process. And that money then will get paid for through the referendum. But we do the minimal amount of detail required to get this across the threshold of a vote. And then we can seriously spend money and time on it, if that helps.
It's nothing. You just talk.
Okay, Lou Torrey, I live at Turner Court, been here for over 30 years. So I've been through a lot of these things before. I have 2 questions. One, when do you think, if this is approved, that it would be completed? Timeline?
Well, what we've been told is we would have kids and seats in 2028. So by December, I think it's December now. It keeps getting pushed because we've been trying to get this through
About 4
for
years,
years.
you'll be finished with
3 to 4 years, yep. Because you need to build some of the space in order to swing the kids.
So
And, yeah,
during that time, you wouldn't expect any other bond issues?
No, absolutely not.
So that leads me to the next question is, where are we now regarding outstanding bond issues associated with the school system? In terms of the magnitude and what our tax payments are annually for current obligations?
Mara's getting a graph, we have that.
Good.
She'll have the exact numbers, but our bond issue from 2001, which was our biggest bond issue ever, has
It's gone.
has rolled off.
There you go.
So, okay, let's see how we can do this. So right now, our current debt service is, at our peak, we were paying $6.6 million a year.
That was 2021.
Because we were paying off the end of the 2001 bond, plus the several bonds we've done to do the roofs, to do the HVAC. So currently, our debt service is down to $3 million
$3 million a year we're paying. That's-
Correct.
as part of our,
And if we didn't do this, when would that end? When would it be at zero?
it's 2037.
I mean,
Because what we do is when our business
me a picture.
manager, I'll bring this over to you. Or
That's okay.
Yeah. When our business manager does a bond, each of these projects, like for example, HVAC, we figure lasts 20 years. So he bonds the HVAC for a 20-year cycle. But other things like a building can last 30 or 40 years, so he bonds that longer. So, and we just did some technology upgrades in the last referendum. He only bonded that 10 years. So he tries to be very conservative to how long the projects before we would need to do it. So if question 1 passed, it would raise it still below the high 2021, and if question 2 passed, we'd still be below that. If all 3 questions passed, we would be at 7.6 million versus the 6.6 million, so it'd be $1 million above that.
But about $90 a year.
So I can show you that graph so you can see it.
and if
more
you
closely.
go, just before, I know you still want to ask something, but if anybody goes to our homepage, right in the middle is a blue thing, and it says superintendent search, which we need to get rid of. And it also says referendum. And if you click on that referendum, on the words, it'll bring you to the page, and you can find this graph that we're talking about and all kinds of other things.
Okay, I just want to get a perspective on what our future is going to be in terms of that thing. And finally, not to hog the floor here, but a completely different question. In the HVAC system, are you at all looking at more efficient devices like heat pumps?
Good question. That came up the other day.
Yeah, there's a reason why.
I think you need, yeah.
No, it was the equipment that we currently have, and it was too expensive to switch to heat pumps when you already have steam,
Yeah.
because there was some mechanical issue, and that this was the more effective, cost-effective
So
way
we're
to do
going
it.
from, I think it's steam to hot water, which was more efficient. Our high school is close to 100 years old. We'll be celebrating 100 years shortly. So and there's parts that have been built 50 years ago, parts 100 years ago, parts 20 years ago. So they found, and they're going to continue to look, because there's, until we actually do the buy, they could make a change in that, an engineering change. But they're trying to find the one that provides both sustainability savings, but like the university's doing a geothermal, and we don't have the money to
We're not gonna
invest
ask for
to
that.
do that. So
It's just too much money.
it's like a great system, but we don't, as a school system, have the money. So we're trying to find the sweet spot of upgrading to a more sustainable system that is also cost-effective for the taxpayer. And another thing we're hoping to do now that the roofs were one of our projects, is we're going to be adding solar, which will be at no cost. We'll be able to fund that through the energy savings. So that's like a project we're all really excited about, which will also help our operating budget. So, and we got a grant for our first 2 electric buses, so we're very excited on that front. So to find that balance for a school system is correct. So the question you asked is totally correct. Like, where does the savings match the upgrade?
Hi, I've been in my house for 55 years. So I have a question about the way you estimate what it's going to cost for a household to be paying, what extra taxes are going to be if this all gets in. And it seems to me that our much-needed housing are mostly rentals. And I would really like to know, there'll probably be a lot of children in there, how you get an idea of how many children to be expected and how it's paid for in the school system because they're not all going to be taxpayers, so the builder or, and you said eventually, even once this, we're going to have to think about the teachers who are going to come in, and that's going to be something new again for us to pay for taxes. So if you could just address those things, I'm curious.
So I can speak to how we try to figure out, and it's an art, not a science, right? How many children are coming? Because you don't know when someone moves in, are they going to bring a kindergartner, a fifth grader, or a high school kid? You don't know, right? So we hire demographers and planners, and we had the same firm actually in 2019. We brought a firm on that had a lot of experience in similar communities, and they did projections for us. And this town has been doing, we've been doing projections for years as a board, and sometimes they're here, and COVID threw it all off. And but they did projections, and then they updated those projections after COVID, and then they updated them again. And they use something called the Rutgers model, and there's a debate. Do you use the Rutgers model of 2018 or the model of 2012? And people, so we said to them, okay, people are debating what models we're using to project children. So please take the buildings we have in Princeton that are already occupied, because it takes about, I guess, 5 to 7 years for one of these developments to fully really kind of come into a constant way of sending kids. So you take the old hospital site, you take the Avalon site there, you take Merwick-Stanwith, we had the Copperwood, and we had him create a Princeton multiplier. So we said, where was that? Where does that take us on these demographics? And so he put that out, and that line came right in the middle of kind of some of the other models they've been using. And we actually, as a board, chose the middle path. We said, let's not take the high estimate, let's not take the low, we can't afford to be wrong, we'll take the middle path. So we have demographic estimates that are the best we can do. They go about 5 years with some certainty. Beyond there, it's difficult to say, but one can say that there's a lot being built, and there's probably going to be continuing to have kids. And we're an interesting community because we have a lot of churn. Churn means that, as you know, in your neighborhood, people move out, new people move in, they renovate the houses, they bring more kids. Many of our neighbors do move. They don't stay as long as they do in some other places. So birth rates aren't as relevant to us as the churn rates and who's coming. And so many people come for our schools, and they bring children. And so so we combine the demographics with kind of a general understanding of how the community works. So that's where we come up with the numbers. But I'll just say that we were told last week that kids come all year long. And last week, I think Riverside got, in January, 17 new children. It's a lot. And I think Littlebrook had 10 or something that showed up in January.
Yeah, it will be 10. I think 8 are here, and they know more are coming, yeah.
They just keep coming. Yeah, and sometimes we've seen in the last couple years there's been less K-1 kids. We thought there would be more, but then when one thinks about the way the market is, the prices are going up and up and up. Families may not have smaller children, they come with middle school children, they come with high school children. We've been getting a lot of middle school children. So it is kind of an art, but we're always watching, and we get reports on a monthly basis of every class size and what's going on in every school. And the second part of the question was?
Funding.
Oh, how do we pay
I
for the teachers?
just want to know, so do the builders of these, are they paying into the town?
Right.
I mean, exactly.
That's a lovely question. So there's the question of what happens when you develop one of these sites.
Yeah.
So we have an existing tax base, and so you take a lot like at the shopping center and you develop it. And what happens? In our community, they negotiate something called a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes. So those people are not in the main tax base. They're out here, and they have a special payment across to the municipality, and they pay for 30 years a certain rate based on rents. I'm not familiar with the math exactly. So they're paying to the town. We have said to the town that we would very much appreciate if some of that revenue stream could be diverted to the schools to help us pay for the teachers that will be required for the children. And we understand that they're willing to speak to us about that in the new year. So that those revenue streams haven't necessarily started yet because people have to move in and pay rent. So that will be an ongoing discussion. And in many communities, there's this type of tension these days because of all of the fair share housing that's going up in many different communities. So we are no different, and we are having dialogue with the council about that.
I'm getting, you're next, sir.
Hi. First, thanks for doing this. It's nice to be able to have a chance to ask questions to people who have been so involved and have a lot of information about this. So thank you. So I kind of have two questions. First, in relation to what you were just talking about, I happened to see Mark Frieda give a talk last spring, I think it was, to a group, and he said in reference to the pilot system that the working assumption of the town was that there's very little impact on the schools because these are apartments, not houses. The vast majority of the occupants would be people without children. That's their working assumption. Maybe they're not talking to the schools. It's funny, you're all in the same town.
Yeah, it is
but,
funny.
But maybe not on the same page.
I'll take that one real quick. I have to say, and this is my personal experience. I have very, what was it, 5 years ago? When did Stanworth and all those people come online? They came online, and we were told there'd be X amount of people, X amount of children that would show up. And in August, as we're starting and opening those doors, we're like, oh my goodness, and we had to scramble. Copperwood was supposedly an above 50 community. We have 60 children. Copperwood is, I believe, 135 units with 60 children coming out of it. So the town uses the Rutgers multiplier, which assumes that is an average for the state. When somebody moves in, how many children will they bring? And the Rutgers is the average for the state. We have reason to believe that Princeton attracts more children, that people, when they move in, they do tend to bring children, and our Princeton multiplier that our demographers have created, which has proven to be pretty accurate as they've tested it, does show a higher percentage. So I would say that there is a little bit of a disconnect between the two groups.
So it sounds like those discussions are really needed between the school board
Yes.
and the town.
Yes.
The seminary was just approved probably 3 weeks ago, and there were several council members who, when that was approved, because that has 95% of the pilot going to the town, 5% going to the county. But for the first time, several council members publicly said they understand that they believe the schools need to get a portion of that pilot. And that's like the first time that was publicly stated. So we're hoping that will lead to fruitful. We don't want to we know they have expenses by having new, you have to pick up the trash, you have to get rid of the leaves, all the things that you need for a town. But part of when you have a town that's growing and you have a master plan that supports growth as well, that we believe that the schools have to be figured into that plan. And just figuring, oh, we don't think kids are coming, like for us on the school board, we're like, here's 3 developments, here's what happens, and we think that projects out to what's going to happen in the future. And I feel the council seems to be a little more open to having these discussions now.
Good. Can I ask one more? Okay, one more question, and which is that when I try to make a decision about whether to vote yes on these, I also think about, well, how many more bond issues are likely to come up, say, in the next 5 years? This is the only one? Are we likely to have 1 more, 2 more, 3 more, 4 more? And it hasn't, because I think about the taxes that I'm paying already, which are high. So I wonder, do you have any
Well, I guess
sort
our
of plan?
insight, yes, we do. And part of what we did, knowing 2001 was coming down and knowing we weren't ready to put this out, because we didn't want to just replace the money that was coming off from the 2001, is we did smaller bond referendums that you've seen, which did things like roofs, which we knew in 30 years, you're going to have to redo the roofs again. In 20 years, this town is going to have to do the HVAC system again. Something new that happened unfortunately, and we don't like to talk about this, but Sandy Hook happened, and we probably have put in $20 million through these referendums for safety measures in our schools, something we wouldn't have contemplated. So when we say we don't think there's going to be referendums, we work very closely with the police department, and they could come to us because something happen and say, we really need you to make these changes to the buildings, both so the kids are safe, that the first responders are safe. And so several of our smaller referendums have included safety measures, and we've tried to keep them very focused on the maintenance of the building as the repairs come up. And so we don't anticipate a need for a major referendum, but let's say the town, the master plan, they start approving zoning things that are even higher. I don't want to like promise you, but we anticipate not an ask in the next 5 years.
Well, I would say that we are not allowed to bind future boards, so we certainly could not promise you that. But I would also say that very much the attitude on the board is that we would not foresee for a good while. I don't think we would anticipate another
A
bond.
facilities referendum, operating budget, which would not ever be of this scale, but like you say, how do we pay for the teachers? I don't necessarily have the answer to that in 3 years. We may have to have some creative solutions. The new superintendent who we just hired, we're very, very excited about because he comes with a lot of experience in trying to figure out these tricky problems. And he had something happen. We have paraprofessionals, people that we pay, I don't know, $23,000 a year, $25,000, and it's that rate for those type of services. Bus drivers, people who are aides, they can go work anywhere now, and the rates have gone way up, wages have gone up, and we also felt we weren't giving them a living wage. We found a way within our operating budget to increase their wages in the last couple of years when we've negotiated that. The new superintendent that's coming, he went to the public in Chatham and said, I need a $900,000 bond approval, or I don't know what they call it, a ballot initiative or something, to allow him to increase his budget to be able to pay those people in ways that he needed to do. Oh, we lost the pictures. You know, he came up with a way of going to the public and saying, are you willing to take this increase? Not a large, I mean, it's not large. On this scale, we have now done the roofs and the walls and the entrances and the HVAC and the IT and all the pieces of infrastructure for facilities. So I personally I don't see anything large coming in the next couple of years. But on operations, there may be questions. We can't really say. Well, the municipality doesn't have to come to you. They can bond. They don't have to ask the question. We're the board that's required to have public approval, but the municipality can issue bonds without a vote, which people should be aware of. And the county budget, in the last couple of years, one of the reasons taxes has gone up, we've kind of stayed flat on the school side, and we are almost 50%. 47, 48? 47. Okay, but how much has the county gone up?
We went up for 2020. Sorry, for 2024, we went up by, I'm going to say 2.2. The town went up by forgive me the points, like 4.7, and the county went up by 13. So
13%. That's 30% of your
They went
bill.
up 6 times what we went up, and the town went up twice as much as we went up. You're in the increase for 2024. So the 2024 increase has us at 47% of the tax bill at this time.
We're doing our best to keep it as low as possible, and we're also obliged to speak to you about it, which is important, right? So I would encourage voters to try to understand better where their taxes are going across the board. We all should. I mean, I'm equally guilty. I don't really know in the county. We don't watch that budget. We don't even know where to look to see it.
My question is related to the previous question, but I'll just boil it down to a simple one. When you talked about the growth, and the growth is pretty astounding of all these rentals all over Princeton, very suddenly, very short period of time, you made it sound spontaneous. Is there any general understanding of why it's taken place suddenly now, because it's having such an impact on what you're trying to do?
Yes.
There's probably a couple reasons why it's so immediate. Number one is the fair housing settlement, that Princeton was one of the last municipalities to negotiate with the state their settlement. So their deadlines came on very fast because they used a lot of negotiation time to do it. And then
What did that mandate? What did that?
The Mount Laurel case, I don't know if you're familiar with the affordable
No.
housing. So when there's a New Jersey constitutional mandate that that housing be provided all around the state, and the courts have said every municipality has its own obligation, and this has been going on for many years.
Affordable housing. Sorry, she's speaking directly about affordable housing.
Affordable housing, yes. And
So my final question is it possible that the Princeton's very poor and weak negotiating with these predatory contractors is responsible for this? Because if they do these pilot agreements, which I read, it alarmed me when I first read about them. I think it's very shocking and irresponsible that they don't require at least something to go to the school systems.
So I think regarding pilots and whether they're good or bad, I think that it's important to understand that the schools, where the kids come from and how they come is not, we don't take a stance on that. When they come, we're here to welcome them in the doors. The town does have an obligation to fulfill their fair housing obligation, whether they do it through just building single units that are full of affordable housing, or whether they do it through pilots, or these things are, that's not kind of our discussion in a sense. You know, we're just here to provide the education for the children that show up at our doors. I think, in pilot money, it's also important to understand that, for instance, the seminary housing, that money was never in the tax. That wasn't a taxable property to begin with, so that hasn't removed any tax money from the pot, from the space. The other thing, and this is a little bit tangentially, which discussing fair housing, I think what's also important to understand is that in our projections of population, we are only allowed to use, and Beth did touch on this, in the next 5 years, in what's known. So we were not allowed to include the seminary housing that we know is going to come online and will bring X amount of children with it. It also is not allowed to include, there's been a fourth round of affordable housing that was has decided how many units it needed to be, and by June, we will know kind of the next Avalons, the next Alice's that will be built in town.
Affordable housing is only very small part of the whole.
It is, and that's how the town is deciding to fulfill their affordable housing
the
share.
town or the municipality and the school
municipality.
board, you don't have conversation,
School board
don't
cannot,
communicate.
that is not,
in our lane.
that's not our lane. I mean,
We're not
the
allowed.
town has to fulfill its obligation for affordable housing, and it's going to do what it wants to do. It is choosing its way of doing it, and that is a conversation that we as townspeople need to
But they
have
don't
with the
take
council.
into consideration the schools.
And they have said, this is actually the gentleman in the back, he brought this up, in the towns, the town has the, is it called Thanet, or is it, back in Thanet,
Yeah.
they have built senior housing with the idea that they were addressing their affordable housing quotas in a way that was not going to affect the
Generate more
schools.
children.
Generate more
So
children.
they did a mix of housing. There was seven developments in the last settlement, and that's what we're seeing being built. And they get credit for certain types of housing, like for developmentally disabled adults and for senior housing, and how they structure it. There's certain credits that they get against their obligation. We're not involved in that negotiation. We appreciate that there's senior housing there, which doesn't bring children to us, but really it's not our legal or obligation whatsoever. We need to be sticking to our lane, which is just preparing for whoever is coming, any children that are coming. So we're very mindful of that, and we don't really have an opinion on the way that the town is negotiating. Correct, you may have an opinion, but
We are taxpayers too as well, though, so I hear you.
So, and I will also say, a master plan was passed in December, and that it's not, I don't want to just, say it's the affordable housing settlement that's creating some of our challenges, that the master plan is a pro-growth master plan, and over the next 20 years, the council has indicated that zoning decisions will be based upon this more density in town, more density on some of the properties that exist. So in the back of our mind, that's floating in our heads. We can't go to the New Jersey Board of Ed with that because that's very future. But we know that this town, over the next 15 years, 20 years, if they follow the master plan, there will be more people living here in the next 15 or 20 years. Again, as school board, we're here, we have to welcome the kids, we have to be happy to welcome the kids, and we're trying to find the best way to welcome them in the way Princeton is used to providing education.
But I think what's also important to understand is that sadly, a lot of what we're talking about with our needs are actually current needs. It's not even future. It's not even about these future children that are coming. That middle school is just packed to the gills. We don't have, there's no communal space where the entire school can get together at one point. When they have indoor recess, oh my goodness, the complaints for my child. Like, it's, I talk to any middle school parent about indoor recess. You know, we had already, at Riverside, I believe they moved, was it Music to the Cart? They took away a black box theater in, was it Riverside? So we are already feeling these tensions. We're already losing, you know, we're losing that black box theater. We're moving music to a cart. So we're already having to adjust and make these adjustments. So as much as I wish this were all about future children that were coming, there's a lot of it that is actually current.
And our demographers have been very clear that it's not just the new housing, that's just a piece. Our existing housing stock, this churn, 85% of our growth, they said to us, is coming from our existing housing stock. So it's your neighbor's house that's turning over and more kids are coming. It's not just this new housing. So we don't want anyone to think that, you know, we're somehow doing this all for the new developments. That's just kind of the icing on the cake. But we have a lot of our own growth internally, organically. Yes?
Hi there. I'm a parent with 4 kids that are currently in the district. And just to give a real-life example as to what we're talking about, my youngest 2 are twins. They are in 4th grade, which means that they started at Littlebrook during the pandemic. When they started, there were maybe 40 kids in their grade combined in kindergarten. In 4th grade now, so 4 years later, there are over 80 students that are in their grade. So they have more than doubled in the past 4 years. So what you're hearing is that, yes, more kids are coming from these apartment complexes that are popping up all over the place, but we're seeing it on our street. People are moving, like with the pandemic, they've moved out of New York to live in the suburbs, and the kids keep coming. And we're not necessarily driven by birth rate in this town. I keep hearing the birth rate in general is down, but I think our town is very unique in terms of the people that we attract here through the university, researchers that come, just our proximity to 2 big cities. And we're seeing the kids come more and more.
And as a community, I would say we are incredibly fortunate because we have such great support for public education. I mean, our community, you know, you all come here and ask these great questions. We have the university that has given us a 5-year deal. They started at $1.7 million a year. They went up by 4%. I think we're getting about 1.89 now a year for 5 years, which is money outside of the cap, right? We have support that many other districts, hardly any, I think, could say they have. So we will have challenges with the operating budget, I'm sure. But I believe that we have a community with resources that we're going to be able to figure it out, right? We're not necessarily going to be coming back to taxpayers, I hope. I think there's other ways of raising money, but we're also, it's exciting that people want to live here, and we're proud of our schools, and we're grateful that people want to come and send their kids to school here. It's wonderful to be in a vibrant community. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're dealing with all this. So I think, you know, we're trying to think positively as well, and these new children will bring, you know, more energy and vibrancy to the schools, and we think we're building just the right amount, because having lived through the pandemic where suddenly everything changed, you don't want to build too much too fast. You just don't want to build too little. And what we're doing is just right. We think it's kind of the Goldilocks. And there are other possibilities. If we have a lot more elementary school kids, Riverside School could still have a little bit of a module added to it someday. That would be fine. We know we have room there because we've looked at it all now. We have the data. But we think what we're doing right here is really responsible and appropriate. And again, we appreciate that the state has the senior tax freeze. I mean, there's ways that people can find some relief. We're not necessarily burdening some of our lower income tax homeowners. But we're also mindful that we're asking for, you know, a significant sum. We're all paying it ourselves. So we appreciate that you're thinking, carefully about it. And anything else we can add to answer. Yeah.
This may be obvious to a lot of people, but I still don't understand why we are in a situation where there's a pilot system for new developments, and why does the township have to go that route? Because you're bringing in all sorts of people, developers making money, and yet who ends up paying for that? The developer pays, and it goes to the council's funds, and it's up to their discretion of what they do with it. Can you enlighten me some about this?
Well, I think if I can just, my layperson's understanding of pilots is these affordable housing obligations, these housing obligations are mandated by law for the towns, right? And so they need to come up with a solution in a certain period of time. And if they don't, then a developer can come and build whatever they want. It's called the builder's remedy. So they're always worried about not making that deadline, and then somebody comes and says, I want to build a 70-story apartment building or whatever. They could, technically. So it's called a builder's remedy. So they have to come up with a solution that works and that's feasible economically. And so they say that it's sometimes necessary to give some economic incentives in order to get a builder to build the right type of housing. That's my understanding.
And my basic understanding is also that if we were to do more of our own kind of communities, that entire tax bill would then fall on us as taxpayers. So if we were to build a high-rise that was going to be fully affordable, that would totally come out of our tax dollars. So in essence, I guess the builder is we're kind of paying the builder slowly back. I'll stop there. But again, it's their. That's not our purview. Our purview is to educate the kids who come to our door and to be prepared for that and to keep our level of excellence at the level that this community expects. And that's where we focus our efforts.
I just want to, I'm also a taxpayer. A couple of council meetings ago, there was an extended conversation with a lot of people asking about pilots and why we're doing them and how, and I wouldn't even want to try and like reiterate to you, but I think all the council meetings are recorded. So I can try and find out which one it was if you want to contact me, and I can find the recording and share it with you, because that really explained, people were saying specifically this. And I do want to, it's kind of like the school. When I came back to town as a grown-up, I grew up here, and I was like, wait, the schools aren't a part of the town? Like, I don't understand how that works at all. And it's like, for me, it's sort of like Princeton University is an entity, the town municipality is an entity, schools are an entity, and they do all talk to each other, but they don't necessarily have to work together. But they try, because we're all part of the community. So, but anyway.
I also think the state is a little behind, that they made some of these laws and didn't require builders that potentially would have students to even take a small percentage and send to the schools. Yeah. Like they left a swath. They left towns very open to make their own decisions, and we've started to hear more and more school boards having these conversations with their towns because they're hitting this wall that's coming, and coming up with what is a fair amount. Like, I get that the town is going to have obligations, having more people in the town. We totally understand that. But we think a portion of those obligations involve the schools. If we weren't starting with schools that were already full, it might have had less impact. But we were really starting from a place that didn't give us a lot of buffer.
A technical question. In any case, the referendum is binding for you and will be with any number of voters. So if only 10 people will vote, that will be binding, correct?
Correct.
So what doesn't happen? What happens if the referendum is not approved?
If it's not approved, then we go back to the drawing board and we think about when we bring some of these projects back again. And unfortunately, we'll have to use our educators' time to continue to think about where to put the children, and then when do we come back to taxpayers? Because we will have to keep coming back. I mean, we can't manage with the space we currently have. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, it also involves, it's, as we said, the music goes onto the cart. You know, you're starting to affect, let's say the trailers, which they don't currently cost anything at the high school because they've been there 100 million years, but their cost, if we put them on, is actually huge. Like, I frankly don't think I know that we cannot afford them. But if we run out of space, we will have to find a way to afford these unaffordable trailers that will be parking out front of the schools. So should the referendum not pass, there will be many difficult decisions that'll come down. And then once you're expending that expenditure for these trailers, then that decreases your budget for other things that you're actually doing to teach the children. So we're going to have very difficult decisions that we would have to make as time progresses and as we face different situations. And frankly, yes, as we will probably come back.
Yes, but if you accept this suggestion, since you spent so much time on this, you are asking for this money. Maybe somebody can vote against just because of the figure. They say, oh no, 89 is really. So I understand that we did this on trust. You used the word trust. Trust our architect. Trust the people in the municipality that check what the architects will do. If the referendum is not approved, I would just suggest that you do again in a more open way and say, look, these are the details, these are the estimates, and maybe those who didn't vote because it was 89 million, maybe we will vote yes when it's 40 million, when it's 10 million. I mean, the real problem to me, at least, is that there was no discussion about the figure. It was just that. You said, trust the architect.
We actually have had discussions for the last several years. We've had open meetings. You can go on our website and watch. You can watch them. We've spent hours and hours in public developing these plans. And we had price tags for a 5-6 school. We had price tag for a sister school model. We had the architects give us estimates to the best everyone could to understand the different costs. So we actually have had those discussions in public for quite some time now, and I would encourage you to go on our website under future planning and look at some of those.
And anytime you're interested in what we're doing on the finance side of it, the three of us, you'll see us once a month at 8 a.m.
We're open.
You can come to the operations committee and on a Zoom, and you can listen in as we discuss the HVAC, what we talk about
gory
everything.
details.
Playgrounds, every boring detail, every technical thing you want to hear, anything finance and facilities related. Once a month, we're talking about it in public on a Zoom. And you can find that information on the district website. There's a board, it'll say board somewhere in our menu. Click on board. And there you'll have our meeting dates, and the Zoom link is always within that meeting date. So once a month, come join us at operations. You'll see the three of us and some other people.
We make lots of sausage.
You'll see the sausage being made. It is definitely, we try to be as open as we possibly can, with the one caveat that if we are too open, then the guy that's going to put in, the new windows for us, we don't want him to know how much he can bid. So we do try to.
That's the issue.
That's the issue. So. Yes, but they don't know what their individual slice of the pie is. So the individual slices of the pie are, or that they have no idea what those individual slices of the pie is. We don't go out to one person for $89 million.
Oh, no.
As Senator indicated earlier and did a great job of explaining it. We really do. We divide up. Once we get well, it could just be 38 million, or maybe it's this 38. We don't know what's going to get approved.
Wait. There's a question. I can bring the mic to you so everyone can. Okay. Sorry. Well, just wait for the mic. She's ceded her time.
You have so many pieces, you say. If you divide it into so many pieces, doesn't that actually cost more? It becomes more expensive?
No, because we have different contractors. It's like when we have a general, we have a general contractor, but it's like when you're fixing your house. Like you're calling a plumber, you're calling an electrician, you're calling the windows, you're calling the roofer, all of those are separate bids that add up to the money. So each of these, it might be a project that is within this for $200,000. It might be a project within it that's 1.8 million. It might be a project for 5 million. All of these are discrete projects that total this amount. So it's like when you're, as I say, when you're doing your house, you don't have to take the lowest bid, but you might call 3 plumbers in and say, I have this job, and you get bids from your 3 plumbers. We do the same thing. They literally come to our school. We explain the projects to them so that they have as much detail as they can have, and they put in a bid for what they think it would cost to do the project. We usually have a good bid, has 5 to 10 bidders on it. And so, but they're very discreet because we're using the contractor who's going to do the electrical work for the renovation, the contractors that's going to do the steel work, the contractors that's going to do the window work. So it's all very discrete projects that they're bidding out.
Or another way, another way to think about it, hold on a second. Another way to think about it is to say, if I had a beach house and a mountain house and a Princeton house, you're not going to use the same contractor for all 3 of them. You're going to have different people. And that's what these in essence are. So we have multiple bids, multiple projects that run. And as Beth was alluding, when things, if a bid comes in too high or too low, we'll move on from that one, we'll park it, and we'll move on to another one to get the price that we need to get. To each of these little slices of the pie add up to that 89 million, and we watch it like hawks. And we are very proud. The last 2 have been under budget. So our team is doing a fantastic job of paying attention to
And we
money.
don't just get a number, 89 million, and say, okay, we're going to submit that. We have committees in closed session where we see every bit that's broken down and we decide what we're going to put into the project. So we know, we have seen the breakdown of the estimates of the different pieces of the projects, but we're just saying legally, that's not something that the district can disclose before it goes to bid, because otherwise it undermines the whole bidding process. No, yeah, we have an architect who designs the needs, but then they go out with all the different, they have engineers and cost engineers in their firm that look at the different trades and estimate the different projects. So every piece is estimated, and then it all adds up. And then we decide how we present it to the voters. We split it up because we think if what's the triage, what will impact the kids the most is if we don't have enough elementary classrooms, right? That's going to disrupt a lot of families, a lot of children. We also need the middle school very badly, but we made a decision to put the first question to make that the elementary question, because we think some taxpayers may not want to pay 89 million. Maybe they say, I'll give you 37. We'll just do 1.
But I
right?
think you also have to know that if the architect said, oh, this is going to cost 90 million, because he wanted his buddy to make 90 million, but Susan's not my buddy, and she's going, I'll do it for less. So I'm going to go bid on that, because we have to openly bid. And then when she comes in with the lower bid, by law, we have to take that lower bid. So there's no real, if the architect is wrong, the market will correct it and catch it, and we will, by law, have to take that lower bid. So there's not really a risk in that architect having been wrong.
Unless they're under.
Unless they're under, which is, that is actually, yeah, that's a far greater problem if they're under. But, because then we can't do things. But if they overbid, we would return, any excess gets returned to the taxpayer. We pay down you have to, by law, pay down the interest and principal.
Can I just ask a question to confirm the process? You're required to have somebody to come up with an estimate, and then there was 2 parts of the process. So it's like, not even you have a choice about getting multiple architects to come up with a vague idea. You have to pick one. Is that right? Can you just go through the actual process again? So it's not like you're skimping on something. You're just doing what you're legally bound to do
We
until you get to
interviewed
this point.
architects. The one that we chose for this, we've worked with now on 2 different referendums, but we interviewed, I think, 4 firms to pick the architect that we felt the most comfortable with and that would provide us with the best service. When you elect us, one of the things you elect us to do is go to these meetings every month, and literally, line by line, we are getting, like, this is what we spent this much, this is where we think it's going to go over, this is where we think it's going to go under. We're kind of geeky, and we like doing this, but that's kind of, when we get elected, that's our job, is to do that for you guys so that you can come. We have that in an open meeting, but that's kind of how we're elected, is to make sure that these numbers are correct. So there is going to be an issue of trust. Like, you're going to have to, we think we have the last 3 or 4 referendums shown that we've earned that trust by how these have been completed. But that's like that. We can't advocate how you should vote, yes, no. We can just present how it was put together.
And we have spreadsheets.
When you want to buy a car, you go to 3 or 4 different places. I mean, I trust you, but why should I trust you?
But we will also go to 3 or 4 different places. We will not spend 1 cent of money before having gone to 3 or 4 places. It is illegal.
Anything the district
we have to
buys, I
bid.
think it's above $48,000, has to go to bid by law. We are not allowed to spend that money without bidding out. Anything that is going to cost more than, I think it's $48,000, has to be bid out, and we have to take the lowest bid. So we are not allowed to just, spend money of any significance, and even though, yes, trust me, $20,000 is significant, but $48,000 has to be bid out by law.
This is just the first step, yeah. This is just the very first step. You're seeing the very first step of what we think is going to happen. But then once it's approved, that's when we do the real work and the real expenditure to really tighten it up and narrow it down. But nothing gets spent without going to 3 dealerships at least. Sorry.
I just wondered if over time, passing from one board to the other, if there is some sort of a commitment to class size in the community
Yes.
that motivates your choices.
You want to speak to it?
We have in our policy committee, we try to keep K1 and 2 under 22 students per class. It doesn't always work perfectly, but that is the commitment we try. And in 3 through 5, we try to keep it at 25 per class. We can get a little bigger in the middle school and the high school, but those, again, because we have so many move-ins during the year, sometimes you might hit a class that has 26, 27 in an elementary school, older class, and we might hit a class in the middle school that has 30 kids. I mean, they try really hard not to do that because it's not best educationally for the kids. But that's how, when the plan was developed, it was based upon those numbers.
And that's where the need was based on. When we realized we were bumping up against those limits, that's when you make the decision that, yeah, you really do need the space.
These are great questions. It's really good to have dialogue with people. Sometimes people just criticize what we're doing with no real specifics, and it's nice to know what your concerns are, what we can answer, what we can't answer, and I appreciate this conversation very much. And we, encourage you to vote in any event on the 28th. And there's 4 polling locations. They're not in the schools this year. In fact, I can tell you where they are. They are at, you'll probably get I think everyone gets a ballot in the mail, but they're going to be at Suzanne Patterson, the Hook and Ladder on North Harrison, the Johnson Education Center, and the Public School Administration Building at Valley Road. And if you have questions, you can find them on our website. It tells you exactly what your district, where to go.
Are these for all registered voters?
Yes.
Because I received one as a mail-in. My wife, who's a registered voter only for Europe, did not receive one. So can she reach out to the election
It's
board?
not too late. You have until the 21st, I believe, to
Of
reach out
January.
to get a mail-in ballot.
They have to receive it.
Even if she wants to go to one of the locations, that she doesn't need to have a ballot or an information. with her,
Correct,
just-
correct. You can't really file a by-mail ballot on site, but she can go and just vote.
Locations are for specific residential areas?
Yes.
Yeah.
On our website, you can put in your address and it'll tell you which one.
And if you are mail-in, you are not allowed to do it in person. I found out regrettably. And the mail-ins have to be done, I think, 3 o'clock the day before, the 27th. So, yeah.
I think they can be postmarked on the 28th.
And if people have follow-up questions for you after the event?
We're here, we'll stick around, and also you can write to us at our board addresses. We're happy to answer questions.
right.
We talk about this. We've been working on this for a long time.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
everyone,
so
for coming,
much.
for your questions, and to the Board of Ed for responding.